We got another video from Cold Case Christianity, Evidence for God, so you don't feel crazy. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and please join the Discord if you want to talk to the community just a little bit more. But we're going to get right into this video.
I think in a world in which people are most persuaded by scientific quote-unquote claims, right? I mean, science is the arbiter of all truth in the culture we're living in today. And I hear this all the time. Well, you cannot prove God's existence with evidence. It's really? Is that true? Is there no evidence for the existence of God?
Nope.
Well, I learned one thing working criminal trials.
Well, that's not necessarily true.
Right? There's direct evidence and indirect.
There's no good evidence for the existence of a God.
Evidence. That's it. That's every form of evidence that we use when making a case in front of a jury. Direct and indirect evidence. Now, direct evidence is of one kind. It is eyewitness testimony. If it's not an eyewitness who can tell you what happened, who did it, you can describe the entire event.
Eyewitness testimony is not direct evidence. Many times, eyewitness testimony is not even permissible in court. Eyewitness testimony is incredibly unreliable. There's been many studies done on this from actual professors. There's tons of data on this of how unreliable eyewitness testimony is. Eyewitness testimony is not direct evidence. Maybe I misheard him, but I'm pretty sure he said it was.
For you, then you can't use direct evidence. Now, indirect evidence is everything else. In cases like mine, DNA evidence, that's
What? Direct evidence is some dude saying, hey, I saw a thing. But indirect evidence is everything else. He must have been the worst homicide detective. that was
indirect.
Silly.
Fingerprints, indirect evidence. Behaviors people observed, indirect evidence. Statements he made, indirect evidence. Unless it's an eyewitness who can tell you what happened, everything else is indirect evidence. By the way, there's no such category as hard evidence, so please stop saying that. We don't have hard evidence and soft evidence. There's direct evidence and indirect evidence. Now, could we make a case for God's existence from direct and indirect evidence? I think you could. Direct evidence might include, for example, eyewitness accounts. Even if they're written down over a period of time, we have 4 Gospels that provide us with direct evidence, eyewitness accounts.
Okay, eyewitness evidence is not direct evidence. It's not completely. It's largely unreliable, for starters.
So we can test those, but that's 4 Gospels that provide.
You have 4 Gospels, which first you have to prove that they are eyewitness accounts, which by and large they weren't. And on top of that, the Gospels disagree with each other. The resurrection story is massively different in the 4 Gospels. All right, let's keep going.
Us with direct evidence, eyewitness accounts, and we can test those.
If you want to know the reliability of eyewitness accounts, just read those 4 Gospels, and you can see just how unreliable the eyewitness evidence is. They're wildly different, down from who found the empty tomb, who was at the empty tomb when the women got there. Were there guards there? Was there lightning bolts? Was there like an earthquake? Was somebody in the tomb? Was somebody not in the tomb? Did they appear to him not? It's wildly different eyewitness evidence.
But that's one way to determine. And by the way, if there's a person historically who rose from the grave with the power of God, and you have an eyewitness account that chronicles that, and if you test the eyewitness account and it passes all with flying colors, why would you not consider that to be sufficient evidence?
Well, how do we go about testing the eyewitness account? This is not a very long video, so I'm sure he's going to glaze over that.
To believe that God exists. But if that's not the way you want to go, you want to go with indirect evidence.
So yes, I would say that if the eyewitness testimony passed with whatever flying colors means, then that might be somewhat good evidence, but it doesn't, and we have no way to test it.
Evidence, well, if we're in a universe where all space, time, and matter leapt into existence from nothing, that universe that resulted appears to be fine-tuned to a razor's edge for the existence of life. Not only that,
the Kalam and fine-tuning argument are also terrible evidence for the existence of a God.
That life emerges.
It's not evidence for the existence of a God. It's simply an argument of how things, the Kalam, how did things get started? And then the fine-tuning, you have to demonstrate fine-tuning, which hasn't been done.
Is from non-life in a way that is still yet, no one can explain that even now, their origin of life.
I agree with you. This was perfect. This was perfect. Thank you so much. This is the first thing I've heard from what's his name, Wallace, that is honest. I agree with him 100%.
Emerges from non-life in a way that is still yet no one can explain that even now. There are
Nobody can explain that even now. I agree, including you.
of life studies that still cannot explain how life emerges from non-life. And when it does emerge, it has a very commonly held observation that biology displays at least the signs of design, the attributes of the appearance of design.
No, no, they don't display the signs or the attributes of design. Biology is a wacky, complicated, just is it's a mess. If there was an all intelligent, powerful, omniscient being that created this, he was either having a bit of fun or he was not those things because the design is so terrible. I mean, you're telling me that God designed a planet and then put creations specifically on this planet that literally can't be on the planet for too long or they'll die without housing or something. Like you could just stand outside and you'll die. The vast majority of the planet is unhospitable for humans. It most of it's covered in ocean. The sun will kill you, the wind will kill you, the temperature will kill you, the environment, the bugs, everything is designed to kill you. The design argument is it's not a good argument. It's not a good argument at all.
So we're in a universe in which we have minds that act freely. We are in a universe that has objective, transcendent moral truths. We are in a universe in which we sense the presence of evil or the existence of evil. And we have to have some type of high moral standard of righteousness to even detect such a thing. Look, these are indirect attributes of the universe that we could make a case.
No,
We could use these as evidence to make a case for the existence of God.
no, you
Because
cannot.
it turns out that if there is
If you can, then do it, please.
God, he is the best explanation for those attributes of the universe. And that's all we're trying to do in a crime scene, right? Is figure out which suspect will best explain the evidence in our crime scene. It turns out that you can make a case for God from both the direct and indirect evidence. Let me give you another way of thinking about this. What kind of evidence would even suffice? What are we really looking for here? I always ask that question because what they want.
What kind of evidence would suffice that there was a being who's been around forever, for all of eternity? He's just always existed. He exists outside of space and time, but yet has the ability to dip into space and time and back out whenever he wants, and decided that he wanted to create uh, people in his image, and then they they ate a fruit that he put there that he told them not to eat, but he's omniscient. So he would have known that they were going to eat it, and he put the tree there anyway. And he would have known that the serpent is going to come and deceive his creations, but yet he put the serpent there anyway. He knew all of this was going to happen. And as the events that he orchestrated, that he put into place, he created the snake, he created the tree, he knew all of this was going to happen. They ate the apple, he kicks them out, and long story short, we have to suffer for all of eternity for that, except he's going to come down in human form and sacrifice himself to another part of himself that apparently that he didn't know that he was part of himself, and then we are forgiven for our sins as long as we love and believe and follow Jesus Christ, who is also himself. Nothing about that makes sense. Nothing about that makes sense. Please convince me through direct and indirect evidence that that story is true.
What they need is for God to come right now and act miraculously in this moment and write their name in the stars or write their name on the side of the mountain. Well, I can't make.
I mean, that would be nice if anything even remotely close to that would happen, but we get nothing. We get a book and we get this guy.
That happen for you. So I don't think we can have a productive conversation if that's the kind of evidence you need. But I think we could look at attributes.
But here's the problem with this argument that he's trying to make right now is like, well, I can't make that happen. Well, why not? If you're trying to sell me on a God that wants a personal relationship with me, that loves me, that cares about me, that wants me to be in heaven, but he can't give me anything to even show that he exists, let alone he is deserving of worship, or he wants nothing. He gives nothing. Sell me on that God. Why can't we get anything remotely close to the type of evidence that he's talking about? Your name written in the stars. Do you know how easy that would be for a God to just snap your fingers and do that? But he won't. He doesn't. I don't know.
Of the universe and ask specific questions and see if the best inference is not a what as a cause, but a who. So, for example, as I look at the information in DNA, and I see how those nucleotides are arranged in that longest molecule known to humans, DNA, and I see that information, those nucleotides are arranged in a code that is informative, that is information. And I realize from all my past experiences anywhere, that information always comes from the mind of an intelligent being. Why would I not?
Okay, so first off, he's using information very fast and loose here, but whatever. Let's give it to him. I'm giving him this argument. So you have a God who knows everything, literally everything, and he's all powerful, so he can do everything, but yet he creates DNA. First off, why, if you're an all powerful, almighty God, why do the DNA thing at all? DNA shouldn't exist. Why do we have blood? Why do we have to breathe oxygen? But regardless, let's just give him the argument. Your perfect God created DNA in such a way that it can be altered to create catastrophic effects on a human, from birth defects and cancers. And so your perfect, all loving, omnipotent God, okay, fine, whatever, he did the DNA thing, but the you get what I'm trying to say. Why would an all-loving, all-powerful God create DNA in the first place and then let it be so destructive to the human body? It can be anyway. I don't know. That doesn't sound like a God that's has any type of love or intelligence.
Then look for a who to explain the information in DNA. Let me put it this way. If I walked into a crime scene and there was a struggle in this crime scene and the suspect killed the victim here, and sure enough, there is blood spatter on the wall where the murder occurred. That spatter pattern I can attribute to the physics of blood and gravity and action that caused the blood spatter on the wall. I could explain that with nothing more than physics. But if I walked into the same room, instead of there being blood spatter on the wall, there was written in this victim's blood, he deserved it, on the wall. Now I'm not looking for a what. It's not physics that caused that. I'm looking for a who, because that information and that sequence of code we call language, right? The English language, if it's written in English, that has to come not from physics, but from a mind. If we are seeing information in DNA, and we know by practical experience, it always comes from mind, why would we not look for a who in explaining DNA, by the way?
It's not information. That is such a bad analogy. Oh my God.
A very famous atheist named Antony Flew, one of the most famous atheists of the last century, before he died, moved from atheism to at least deism or theism on the basis of one thing: information in DNA. Even Antony Flew decided at some point it was not reasonable to answer that, to look for a cause that was a what. He knew the only cause that could cause information in DNA was a who. So yes, you actually can use the world around us and evidence in the world around us to infer that the most reasonable explanation for that evidence is the existence of God. Is believing in God like believing in the flying spaghetti monster?
No. Okay, if you were to grant this information argument that he's talking about, which information in DNA is not like information that somebody wrote on the wall in blood, it's a terrible analogy. But the best, if you granted the argument, okay, fine, it is information, and only information can come from a who, then that God is not your God. The God who did the DNA is not the God of the Bible as he's represented. That's just not compatible. Is God like believing in the flying spaghetti monster?
When I hear skeptics online
sort of
mock or poke fun at believers, Christians, or any kind of theist, you'll often hear them say that believing in God is like believing in the flying spaghetti monster. This flying spaghetti monster as a notion has been offered as kind of a substitute for God. And it was first really created by a guy named Bobby Henderson in 2005. He also created a kind of a larger view called Pastafarianism. And really this was created by Bobby in response to the Kansas school district, where he saw that intelligent design, a notion of creation that comes from the mind of a designer to explain the features of the cosmos, the features of biology. He saw that emerging in his local school district, and he decided to offer this alternative and to claim that believing in God is as ridiculous as believing in the flying spaghetti monster.
I don't know the origin stories of the flying spaghetti monster. I'll take it at face value.
Let's be clear about one thing. Bobby does not believe in the flying spaghetti monster any more than he believes in God. This was really just a notion that was invented to kind of make the distinction, to make a case against God. And although he's applied in a number of countries for Pastafarianism as a recognized national religion, he's been denied everywhere he applied. Why? Why would that be the case? Well, in large
Why
part
would that
because
be the
people
case?
understand, and governments understand, and nations understand the difference between religious claims and fictional claims. We have
That is not the
evidence
case.
to demonstrate that Christianity
That
is
is
true
not
from
the
both the
case.
direct evidence of eyewitness accounts and the indirect evidence of features of the universe that demonstrate that God exists. It's not as though we're just picking a notion out of thin air and describing it as
Okay, so he's making a very terrible argument against his God because many government agencies have recognized many religions, not just his religion. So either he's saying that there is good evidence, good enough evidence for the government to recognize Christianity and Islam and Buddhism and all these other religions that have that are officially protected and under the government's. So he's making the same argument for his God as all these other gods, or
such a way that we want this is true from both the direct evidence of eyewitness account. We have good evidence between religious claims and fictional claims. We have good evidence to demonstrate.
yeah, I mean, so Mormonism, Jehovah, they would also have to have this good evidence.
That Christianity is true from both the direct evidence of eyewitness accounts and the indirect evidence of features of the universe that demonstrate that God exists. It's not as though we're just picking a notion out of.
And governments don't grant protected status like of a recognized religion based off of how plausible they actually are. That's just not how that works.
Thin air and describing it in such a way that we want everyone to believe. But no way, actually, this is the great thing about Christianity. Christianity is not just a claim, an unattached claim, a set of proposals about God. No, Christianity is a claim about a historical event that can be tested the way that other historical events can be tested. Look, I will tell you, but there are certain.
No, it is not. That's such an assertion. How can you test? How can you test that Jesus rose from the dead? How can you test that Jesus was the son of the God of the Old Testament? How can you test that? Oh my God, this is so
kind
bad.
of fortune cookie type of religious claims, maybe a set of just proverbs that people will look at and say, these are the beautiful teachings of Buddha or Baha'u'llah. But these do not describe an event that's rooted in history, like the resurrection. That is the claim of Christianity. That makes Christianity very different than any other kind of religious claim. It's not as though people thought up, well, let's just think of a crazy character like the flying spaghetti monster. No, it's that something happened in the course of history that people observed and wrote about. And we have that direct evidence.
Like Muhammad?
Claim to review thousands of years later. That is very,
like Joseph Smith?
Very different. Can you see the difference between fictional notions
like L. Ron Hubbard
that are not rooted in history and claims for which we have an historical record? If we can't see that distinction, it's going to be hard to advance any conversation about the nature of God or Christianity. The claims related to the flying spaghetti monster are by their very nature very different than the claims related to Christianity.
So maybe I agree with him at the end there, because the flying spaghetti monster was never presented as something that happened. I don't know the origin. Boy, this was bad. All right, we're going to end this. I don't want this to run too long. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and join the Discord. I'd appreciate it.